Hello, my fellow Barsoonians! I come to you today with a review of Princess of Mars, part of the hashtag marsathon 2020, a event hosted by a variety of people, which I will get to at the very end of this thing, and I will have listed down below, where all these booktubers are reading the Mars novels of Edgar Rice Burroughs. This is, I think there's like 11 novels in the series. I better get that straight, I guess. But we're starting off with the very first one, A Princess of Mars. And well, we're starting off with with my hobgoblin smile, have attached myself to the back of the party and have decided that I too am going to read these novels. At least having read the first one, I think I will go on and read the rest. If you want to get to the spoilers, I enjoyed myself a lot. Published in 1912 by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Edgar Rice Burroughs, American pulp fiction author, born in 1875, died in 1950. This was his first initial burst of energy. I think within the first 2 years of writing, he had created about 3 out of the 4 of the big series he's known for. I'd say the biggest, other than his Barsoonian novels, John Carter of Mars, he's best known as the creator of Tarzan. So A Princess of Mars, I would say it was firmly in the tradition. It probably started the tradition, for all I know, of kind of science fiction, science fantasy novels. So this is a progenitor of what would become, in our modern day, Star Wars. As scientific as Star Wars is scientific. So that's where you get. This is not your hard science fiction. This is your adventure, fun, knights with their swords kind of science fantasy stuff. Now I warn anyone who's going into this expecting, I'm going to get Star Wars. It's like, no, you're going to get the early progenitor of Star Wars. And while it's got lots of charms and fun to it, it is also something that also shares a lot of kind of elements with other pulp of the time, of westerns, of as I was reading this, I thought a lot about Edgar, Rider Haggard, who did King Solomon's Mines and She, and the character of Alan Quatermain, which is sort of a lot of kind of colonial adventure fiction, where the white guy goes to the colonies and becomes the savior of the natives, and this has got a lot of that stuff. But we're doing it with aliens, which let's get into the setup of this book. It starts off with John Carter of Virginia, and he is a guy we get a framing device at the very beginning, where fictional Edgar Rice Burroughs says, this was this fellow, that was Southerner. Apparently, the slaves of the estate fairly worshipped the ground he trod upon. He goes off to Civil War, and nobody sees him for like 10 years after that. And he comes back unchanged. Through a series of events, he is found apparently dead on the side of a thing, but has left strict instructions on exactly how he wants his body disposed of. And it's put into this tomb where there's good ventilation, and there's a spring on the inside so it can be opened from the inside. And this is all very odd. But he also left a manuscript, and Edgar Rice Burroughs says, I am presenting you this manuscript of John Carter of Virginia. And indeed, what seems to have happened is, after the Civil War, he is very much a Western thing. He's gone to the West for his fortune in mining, and there's those dastardly Indians. As a Canadian, I would say Native peoples, but this, of course, is going to say Indians, because we're very much in a Western, and he and his partner are fallen upon by Indians, chased. He ends up in a cave. He gets paralyzed or something like that, and the natives come, and they kind of look behind him and are kind of like freaked out, and they run off. And through what seems to be a force of will, he astral projects. As I said, science fantasy here, and suddenly he's outside his body. He goes outside, he looks up into the sky, and he sees Mars, and through whether his own force of will or some kind of whatever attraction, suddenly he transports himself to Mars, and he wakes up on Mars, where he finds this bizarre structure. He's like in the middle of a kind of a Martianscape, lots of yellow moss covering the ground. Because this is scientific concepts of what Mars was at the time, and the concept was that, oh, this is actually a living planet. There's atmosphere and stuff like that. Yes, he finds this incubator with eggs in it. And he's like, what the heck is this? And he also finds out that because he's on Mars, he's got super strength and he can leap high into the air. All these, it's basically Superman before Superman, that idea of, I've come from a planet with a lower gravity, so therefore with my Earth muscles, I'm super powerful. And he finds this thing with eggs, and some of the eggs hatch. There's these strange kind of light green creatures, and pretty soon over the way comes these much larger green creatures, where he meets Tarkus, one of these green Martians who are 15 feet tall. They've got like 6 limbs. They've got red pupil eyes in the whites. They've got tusks. A strange, barbarous, dog eat dog group. He meets them. He meets Sola. He's one of the women that Tarkus has around him. They're not really particularly organized in any kind of familial units. And he witnesses a battle between the green Martians and the red Martians. The red Martians, who are basically kind of just human-shaped Martians, but with red skin, which is interesting, coming from the beginning of the thing where we had him pursued by the Indians, who are often called red men. But yes, so we have these red Martians, and they take a red Martian captive, and that turns out to be Deja Thoris. Her face was oval and beautiful in the extreme. Her every feature was finely chiseled and exquisite. Her eyes large and lustrous. Her head surmounted by a mass of coal-black, waving hair caught loosely into a strange yet becoming coiffure. Her skin was of a light reddish copper color, against which the crimson glow of her cheeks and the ruby of her beautifully molded lips shone with a strangely enhancing effect. Needless to say, John Carpenter of Virginia kind of falls for Deja Thoris, and that's indeed one of these tricks that these kind of books thing. You think, oh, you're promising me adventure. I'm a 12-year-old boy. This is promise me adventure. It's like, hey, wait a minute. There's a whole ton of romance in my adventure. Reminds me of kind of like X-Men comics, where in the end in X-Men comics, it was a soap opera. I didn't care about the battles. I loved all the soap opera. Will Cyclops and Jean Grey ever get together? It's like, it's all romance when it comes down to it. But yes, and Deja Thoris, she's oviparous, which, guys out there, oviparous women, those are the hottest women. You should really try and track one down. So yes, suddenly John Carter's got this kind of thing. He needs to rescue her because they're taking her to their big leader, Tal Hadjus or something like that, who of course of all the Green Martians is the most kind of sadistic and probably actually sexually active, because a lot of the Green Martians just aren't into that sort of thing. They're just into killing and laughing about torture and stuff like that. So yeah, it's an adventure. It's a Western. It's kind of got that kind of colonial adventure stuff. Romance, not lots of romance, but there's definitely the romance in there, and there's definitely, like, John Carter is totally it's the driving engine of this boy's story. It's all about romance. Interesting that. Now the thing that I kind of like, because I love the adventure, I love the romance and all that stuff, but I also love, especially like a book written in 1912, the underlying ideas underneath it. And I mean, there's the science side, but I'm not really a science guy. He seemed to be actually following some of the ideas, probably, with that pulp fiction writers kind of sense of, like, let's pick all the fun stuff ideas. But what actually kind of got to me is the ideas of the views of race, evolution, and society that kind of come up in this book. So this Mars is called like dying, ruined planet. They have to actually make the air using the ninth ray to be able to like continue there to continue to be life. The red Martians are basically the ones that are making sure that there's still air to breathe on this planet. Now, what they seem to say is in the past, because they visit many kind of ruined old ancient cities, and there's all these beautiful frescoes and stuff like that, where they can see that there was a noble, fair white race that kind of had risen to the height of science and art and everything like that. But maybe due to scarcity of materials or whatever, but there was a mixing of the races, that it seems that the white fair race mixed with the black Martians of the time and the reddish yellow race, and ended up kind of falling into ruin, going into barbarity, which now the red Martians, who are now the dominant form of those Martians, are slowly starting to kind of work their way back into it. And indeed, the red Martians, unlike the green Martians, are peaceful and are trying not to wage war on everyone. They're actually trying to kind of build their society up, where the green Martians are all very savage. I mean, the green Martians seem to have lost all finer sense of kind of friendship or affection. And from birth, they know neither mother or father. The society is organized in such a way that you don't get any of that familial love. It's all about dog eat dog. If anyone in the Green Martian society is deformed or is weak, they basically are instantly shot. And I mean, they have the insane thing with how they treat their eggs. They take all the eggs, put them far, far outside of the city, and then abandon it, because they don't want anyone to know where the eggs are, versus bringing all the eggs into the city and protecting them so that they don't get discovered by their foes and all killed. Which, I mean, even in the novel, John Carter at some point, they basically lampshade it, which is calling attention to something that seems totally illogical and ridiculous. But we know about that, so that makes it okay. But it's like, it still doesn't make it like, how does this make sense at all? But so it's insane. It's insanely super, like, we will wean anything that is weak or deformed in our society. It is, which kind of brings me to the idea of eugenics, which eugenics was something that was developed by one of Darwin's kind of near contemporaries, Francis Galton. And the idea of eugenics is to improve the genetic population by excluding people and groups judged to be inferior and promoting those judged to be superior, which post the Nazis kind of fell out of favor, because a lot of those ideas of what we're going to judge as desirable features obviously is very selective, especially if you're a racist fucksuit. Even nowadays, we're kind of being raised that these things are still being raised, because we have the ideas of genetic selection, the idea that we're going to exclude people, people, and that way. So, and that's obviously something that we're wrestling with. But this seems to be, I feel the eugenics ideas mixing in here. And I mean, it's not like I'm saying that Edgar Rice Burroughs is like endorsing the ideas of, we should kill all of some people, but just showing two kind of races. I mean, the whole thing, you have to find like there was a noble white race, but they mixed with other races, and that somehow descended them into barbarity is probably, it has to be seen as racist, maybe. And you can see, like, John Carter as the white guy who's come in and is going to be the hero of the story, kind of pushes some nasty stuff that way. There's also the ideas of just showing how barbarous and how kind of self-defeating the Green Martians are for their really harsh genetic selection, and excluding all kind of societal kind of bonds is maybe also is kind of a criticism of that kind of idea of we're going to harshly deselect anyone who doesn't. And indeed, some of the green Martians that are the heroes, or the kind of help the hero in this story, are Martians who actually kind of do develop kind of fellowship feelings that have kind of have those kind of familial bonds. Definitely come up in that. So yeah, I find that stuff really fascinating to find embedded in something that's it's it is supposed to be entertainment. It is silly fun. It is something probably written for, just like we just want to kick back and have some fun. This is like the TV or the pulp, the I want to go see a Star Wars movie and have fun kind of crowd. But it's like, well, no, actually within this, even here, we have, Edgar Rice Burroughs incorporating ideas of race and eugenics in the story. I love that sort of stuff in fiction. But then we have to get to the most important character, of course, in The Princesses of Mars, which is, he's got a hobgoblin smile, so I gotta love him. It's Woola, John Carter's dog monster, a Kalat with a hobgoblin smile, tusks and teeth, and is just a giant kind of monster. But he is John Carter's dog, and he saves John Carter, and John Carter saves him, and it's like, it's the true romance of this novel. Or maybe it's a competing one. I totally can see that if you were like a 10-year-old, you wouldn't quite get the whole kind of John Carter Deja Thoris thing. It's like, okay, yeah, whatever. But Woola the dog, it's like, yeah, there's that 10-year-old in me who's like, oh, Woola, go Woola. And also because it is pulp fiction, there's just also just the what the hell storylines. There's or there's stuff like John Carter is immortal. That comes up before anything else. Is like John Carter's like, oh, I think I'm immortal. I've always been 30. I can't remember childhood. I seem to have served like emperors and princes far back in time. So John Carter is like, he's a normal human being, but he's also an immortal human being already. And as the story goes on, you can see why Edgar Rice Burroughs decided, I need this guy to be immortal because long periods of time are going to pass. And by the way, Deja Thoris, that hot oviparous babe, she's also has a lifespan of thousands of years. So it would be kind of sad if John Carter only had 40 or 50 years more to go in this kind of story, and just with the time pass. But there's also I talked about the air plant on Mars. The air plant on Mars, which is run by two guys, one guy in the impregnable thing and one guy out. And I'm not going to say any more other than when that first came up, I went, well, that's a bad idea. And yeah, that's a bad idea. That's a bad idea. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right. I'm going to end there. I enjoyed myself. It is old-timey pulp. It has got a plot that kind of does meander over the place. Edgar Rice Burroughs is writing this as kind of a serial that's coming out in installments, and it's got that kind of, maybe we'll lurch around a little bit, but it's super fun. It's super fun. So yes, let me now just tell you who the hosts are of this great Marsathon, so you can check out their videos. I'm making this review now because I have a very busy month, but I'll release it sort of when I start seeing their videos come out. So, Pints and Paperbacks, Book Invasion, Paperback Junkie, Richardson Reads, and that strangely immortal 28-year-old Steve Donoghue, who has his own little Woola schnauzer. All right, more videos later.